let's talk about go-to-market strategies. Now, a go-to-market strategy is very different from a marketing strategy. And so a go-to-market strategy is a one-off strategy for reaching your first customers and users, beneficiaries. And so you usually do a go-to-market strategy at the start of your business when you're starting up, or in the early stages, perhaps just after you've got a big grant, or when you're at pivotal points in your business. You should be doing it as early as possible, because it is a pathway to finding your first users or your first customers or advocates. Now, this is very different to a marketing strategy. A marketing strategy is a longer term strategy for competing and also to acquire and retain market share. So that's when you have many users or many customers or beneficiaries. So that comes later down the track. We start with go-to-market strategy, and then you would maybe morph that into a marketing strategy. You can, if you are, let's say, launching into a new market and you're a well-established business like WWF, you may also have a go-to-market strategy for launching into a new place. Okay, so I'm talking really fast because there's a lot to get through, and I want to answer all your questions too. So the components of a go-to-market strategy is you want to identify your early adopters or your first customers, your first users. You want to get some runs on the board, because that's going to help you apply for more grants or apply for more place-based funding. So getting your first kind of, we call this traction, first kind of progress is really important. And so identifying your early adopters is pivotal to that. As Joshua has mentioned, the cost of acquiring customers. So we are doing, with regeneration businesses, we are doing great things for the environment and the community. But we also need to be financially sustainable. Otherwise, that's going to hamper our impact. So we are going to be talking about the cost of acquiring customers as well. We're going to talk about pricing because that's important. And you did mention that in the last workshop, that pricing was something that you wanted to know more about. And then we're going to also look at the different channels that you can reach customers. Part of a go-to-market strategy is once you figure out your channels, you then figure out how you're going to communicate through those channels. And you might have a communication plan. We're not going to touch on that today because we do have a whole session on storytelling and pitching. So we're going to leave that for a later workshop. Okay, very good. But the importance of all these things is to find your early users or your early adopters. So then you can make more impact, you can create more change and more impact for these users. You can kind of grow and scale your impact as you can, and you can better get more funding as well in order to do that. I think someone's come. Nope, no one's not off. No one needs to ask a question. Okay, so why you need a go-to-market strategy right now? Okay, so first of all, you don't want to build a business model around customers that are too difficult or too expensive to acquire. Now, we're going to talk more about this, but an example of a customer that may be too difficult or expensive to acquire is, let's say, to be honest, the elderly population is actually a really hard customer to reach because they aren't on the normal, like they're not on the kind of the digital channels. You have to almost go to their homes to speak to them and to kind of create impact with them. So so therefore, because they are difficult to reach, that means they can be quite expensive to reach. So this is important because you want to figure out your channels in order to figure out how you're going to reach the people who are at the heart of your business and who's going to make it grow and create impact. And you don't want to be choosing kind of end users or customers who are too difficult or too expensive to acquire. We've got more on this, so we can talk about that in a moment. If you're thinking that like that's really odd, that customers are expensive and difficult to acquire, we'll talk more about that. Second thing, if you are going to try and access funding, your go-to-market plan or strategy is going to influence your growth projections. It will certainly do that. So whether you're accessing grant funding or place-based funding, you will maybe have to put growth projections in these applications. And so you want to have a pretty clear go-to-market strategy, and that will help you access more of that funding and have a better idea about the future of your business as well. Okay, so you also want to build your awareness. You want to build your awareness of your value propositions with the right people as early as possible. And so I'll use the elderly as an example. If you are, unless you are working in the aged care sector, and you don't have access to elderly folk, it will be very hard to communicate your value proposition to the right people. So yeah, you want to build your awareness with the right people as early as possible, and so they can see the value that you're delivering. And then also you want to be testing and shaping your value propositions to suit. And so your go-to-market strategy is not necessarily, it's not a stagnant document that you kind of write once and put it on the shelf. You will be testing, you'll be shaping, you'll be iterating. Okay, let's talk about pricing. Now, pricing, we're going to talk about different strategies. We're not necessarily going to be talking about what exactly you should price your business at, or your business or your product or your service. The reason for that is you all have different businesses. And it actually requires your domain knowledge to figure out what to price. Your users and your beneficiaries can help you, and I'll give you some examples of that. But I'm just going to talk about some strategies in order to figure out like how you might go about pricing. So you can use a couple of methods. You can use the cost-based method, you can use the value-based method, and the comparable method. And this pricing really is an art and it's not a science. So you almost can't go to a workshop and someone goes, you know what, Joshua, this is what you should be pricing your business at, or your product at, or your service at. It really is an art. So you have assumptions that you then go and test with the market, and figure out, whether that's the best price. Okay. So we're going to use a t-shirt as an example, and we're going to hope that it's a nice regenerative t-shirt, and not extractive. But so using a t-shirt as an example, the cost-based pricing method is you add up your time and you add up your materials, which is your costs, and then you add on a margin. So let's say your costs to make a t-shirt and the inputs to make a t-shirt is $20. You would then add a margin, let's say it's 30%, which is your profit, which then you might put back into the business. And so then the price of the t-shirt is $26. Now, a lot of consulting service-based businesses use this method. Consulting finance businesses use the cost-based pricing. And so I'll let you decide whether you think this is the right method for you. The next method is the value-based pricing. And so this is basically whatever your customers are willing to pay. And so let's say the cost of the t-shirt is $20, but people will pay $200 because they think there's a huge amount of value and you're creating so much impact. And so people are willing to pay $200, and therefore your price is $200. I'll give you an example of this. I had a business, and it was for remote work sites. And we know on remote work sites, there is a lot of depression, there is a lot of mental health issues, there is a lot of suicides on remote work sites. And so we would work with the customers. The payers were actually businesses who had these remote work sites. And then our end users were the folks on the actual site who we were hoping to improve their mental health. And so, and I remember sitting in a meeting with one of these companies. It was actually, this was in the UK, and this company was the biggest solar renewable energy company in the UK. And they had a lot of solar farms and wind farms all over Europe. And they were saying that, a lot of our people who are doing the maintenance on these wind farms and solar farms, they're very lonely. There's a lot of mental health. And so they engaged us to try and help that. And so when we were in that meeting, they asked us, what do you charge? It was an app-based solution. And we said, we charge $3 per user per month. And they almost laughed at us, and they said, that's way too cheap. You should be charging 10 times that price. And so then we updated our pricing model. And so that was very much an example of value-based pricing. We were using a cost-based pricing, we were just adding in our costs, and we found out, we figured out it would be $3 per user per month. But then actually after that meeting, we shifted to value-based pricing. And that meant that we can generate more revenue that could then feed back into our product and create more impact for the folks on these remote work sites to provide them more impact and more value around their mental health. Does that make sense? So two things there. One, that value-based pricing is really an art, and you do need to validate this with your payers and your customers, and also it's really based on the value that you provide. Now, obviously, we want to be responsible to our communities, and just because a community will pay $200, you need to kind of use some judgment around whether you are being exploitative just because they would pay $200. We don't want to be exploitative, and we don't want to kind of just be charging whatever we can charge just because people will pay. So we want to be using a little bit of common sense here when we are setting our pricing model. I have to admit, I didn't have a big issue with charging companies who make a lot of profit a higher fee, so then it could go back into the people and make them happier in their workforce, in the workplace. Okay, so I know there is a lot of questions coming in through the chat. I'm going to come back to them. Okay, so then we have comparables as the third pricing strategy. And so that's when you might be entering a market that's actually quite established. And so you might have competitors. And if you enter the market and you go, I have no idea what to price this service at, sometimes it's a good idea to actually look at your competitors and see what they're charging, because then you can easily undercut or overcut them. And so you can, the reason why this is good is as a new company, you can probably assure that the competitors have done a lot of research around what the customers are willing to pay. And then you can kind of piggyback on the back of that research, and you don't have to waste your time doing the research all over again. You can say, all right, the going rate is $20 a t-shirt. Okay, well, our strategy is to gain market share. We want to increase our impact. So we're going to undercut them by $2 and charge $18.